It's known as the appropriation sheet, and it shows the full detail of the state budget. For fiscal year 2011, Oklahoma state government actually brought in $7.4 billion, but of that, only $4.8 billion was actually deposited in the general fund. Now that's where state lawmakers go to fund state agencies. There are 65 revenue streams for state government. 26 never send a penny to the general fund. 22 others only send part of their proceeds. Of all the ways state government makes money, taxes, fees, licenses, permits, and such, only 26% of them actually contribute to funding education, public safety, and all the other state agencies that get a yearly appropriation. The rest of the money, $2.5 billion, goes directly to 12 other funds that range from pension systems to county governments for highway projects. Money that lawmakers over the years decided to separate from the political process of building a state budget. When you add to it the federal matching dollars that the state receives annually, the actual amount of money that now goes through state government each year is approximately $16 billion. State Senator Patrick Anderson.
We have influence on a portion of it, but there is a lot of money that comes in with federal dollars that we don't have any say-so in that. Different agencies that charge fees are self-funded. A lot of revenue streams that come in that the legislature doesn't touch.
And except for growth in these revenue streams that occurs from an improving economy, legislative leaders are devout. There will not be increased income from tax hikes, and their plans actually call for tax cuts to continue. State Representative Earl Sears is chairman of the House Appropriation and Budget Committee.
I have absolutely know of no one that's going to advocate a tax increase in any way, shape, or form. And would we let that trigger drop again? I have to tell you, I truly believe we would.
That trigger automatically lowers the state's top income tax rate again if the state's economy grows by 4%. At this point, all of the figures indicate the requirements to pull the trigger are likely to be in place. For the other side of the ledger, when state government goes into debt, it means issuing bonds. At this time, it will take until the year 2040 to pay off the state's current long-term debt.
We still have over $2 billion in bonds outstanding. We still have to allocate $180 plus million a year of our state budget to pay those debts off. We have limited amounts of income and resources and sources of income to pay those debts off.
About half of that $2 billion has a dedicated revenue stream to pay off the bonds outside of tax dollars. But that doesn't let taxpayers totally off the hook. Most
of these projects are funded with student fees or other sources of revenue. But the bottom line is if those funds don't come in, it's coming out of general appropriations to the higher ed.
By leaving taxpayers as the co-signer, so to speak, it helps universities and others finance their projects more cheaply. State Treasurer Ken Miller.
If they were not able to fall back on appropriated dollars, they would get less of a bond rating, which means they'd pay a higher cost of interest.
Later this fall, an interim study begins to examine the state's bonded indebtedness. Senator Patrick Anderson will take part. They will also review 12 new bond issues that total just under another $1 billion in debt.
I don't think we can afford to do $942 million in new bonds.
Right now, the state is spending just over 4% of the budget to pay off debt. State Representative Earl Sears says that's about enough.
I think the message is loud and clear. Quit borrowing money and quit going into debt. Let's bring these budgets under control.
Among those bond issues are plans to raise money for long-delayed renovations and improvements to the infrastructure of state government.
We do have a lot of infrastructure needs in the state that have to be paid for with bonded indebtedness because there isn't the income otherwise to do that.
We have a medical examiner's office who's lost its accreditation because of the facility. We need to build a new medical examiner's office.
To accomplish a balanced budget for this fiscal year, state lawmakers got creative. They effectively robbed Peter to pay Paul and then borrowed money to pay Peter back.
Fortunately, the last 2 years, we've gone out, we've issued new debt for transportation expenses and took money away from the Department of Transportation, money that was previously allocated to them to go to another agency. We can't continue to do that.
And then the lawmakers discovered money sitting in some state agencies and departments that they hope no one really notices is no longer there.
We made a point to go in and to tap into numerous revolving funds, okay? So that's a little smoke and mirrors, because I can assure you we tapped into the treasurer fund, but quite frankly, if everybody that we owed them that money came in on a Tuesday, we'd have a problem.
So all this begs the question, is the state budget really balanced?
Well, I think that's an excellent question to always ask the legislature. Are you really balancing your budget? Because whether it's paying these bills or looking at some of the hypothetical revenue sources that we come up with to say that we're going to balance our budget, I think is something that the state's gotten a lot better at, but we still do it.
There is other bond debt created by entities that are part of state government. That totals another $4.8 billion. These bonds are secured through revenue streams other than state government, but some also carry a special state guarantee, known as the Credit Enhancement Reserve Fund. It would pay for the debt if that revenue stream ever fails. So far, it hasn't. The state has other debts, such as the $36 million owed to the Emergency Fund, which reimburses local governments and electrical co-ops for the cost of recovering from a weather disaster.
And I don't think that's fair. It's just not fair to our municipalities or to our taxpayer citizens or the co-ops for the state of Oklahoma to have this. It's basically a 4-year backlog of payments that are owed to them.
That's money that has been owed since 2007. And then there's the matter of $43 million more owed county governments to cover lost income from double homestead exemptions on property taxes for low-income people and property tax exemptions for new industries.
And every year since 2002, every one of the 77 counties have filed this documentation with the state of Oklahoma with the Tax Commission. And since 2002, that fund has not paid the counties for what's owed them.
Larry Stein works for Oklahoma County Assessor Leonard Sullivan, who says the legislature isn't really balancing its budget, with bills like this going ignored.
The state of Oklahoma has a very interesting jujitsu in their bookkeeping process, where if they don't want to pay it, then it doesn't exist.
House Appropriations Chairman Representative Earl Sears says tough economic times have just delayed payment.
These debts that we owe, okay, it's clearly in there when funds are available. There's always some kind of wording that gives you kind of a little wiggle room in regards to this legislation.
72 cents of each dollar owed county governments in the reimbursement fund goes to public schools. Debtors and state agencies are hoping the recovering state economy will mean budget cuts are over and old bills will be paid. However, there are large new bills facing the state for fiscal year 2013. From things that were done to get through the last 3 years.
But it's about $245 million. Well, that's an obligation we have to pay. If we don't do the $100 million bond proposal, or $70 million bond proposal and borrow, that's a $100 million hole. So there's just $350 million.
And add to that the extra $100 million that went to the State Health Care Authority this year. That was the last of the federal stimulus money that the state has been living off of for the last few years. Yet another big hole that will need plugging by lawmakers who go back to work full-time in February.